then in 2014, I decided to kind of put all my own money against, building this sort of new award show for games. It was not going to be on television. It was going to be on this new kind of, streaming stuff on Twitch and YouTube. That was something that I basically, invested in myself to kind of build that. And that was sort of the more entrepreneurial thing, and kind of took a lot of the money that I'd made over the years, being a television, host on TV, and rolled that into sort of, creating the Game Award.
That was Geoff Keighley, host of the Game Awards, talking about how he started a business to do this.
It sounds so weird that that's how you introduce him. What do you mean? Like, I don't think of him as that, like, at all.
As what?
I think of him as game trailer, like, host. Like, I have a different relationship with who he is in my mind. So it's when you say that, it's like, what? Oh, right, yeah. And he owns them. That's the other thing, right? Not only is he the host.
I didn't know that. I knew nothing about his business.
Yeah.
But it's a business. It's a pretty fascinating one too.
Yeah, it's a crazy business to have. It's a really good one too for the industry.
It's pretty unique. I think he fills a kind of a unique role.
We're
going to hear all about it. You told me not to spoil the episode.
Oh, right. Now I'm doing what you do.
I'm not going to spoil the episodes.
Yeah.
But nice to be back in LA. I spent the weekend up at Big Bear, out in the woods, camping.
Nice. Was there bears? Is there bears in Big Bear?
They're bears.
Okay, because I texted you and I was like, watch out for the bears. And I was like, are there even bears there?
I did not see a bear.
Cougars.
Saw ground squirrels. Saw a lot of birds.
I saw a coral snake today. I almost stepped on it.
Is that poisonous?
Yeah, it's venomous, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's yellow, red, yellow, kill a fellow, I think is the rhyme. There's another snake that looks like it that's not poisonous. And in Texas, the poisonous.
Okay. Venomous.
Yeah, venomous, right. Venomous. Yes.
Okay.
Frogs are poisonous. Yes.
Poisonous is like you eat them and you ingest the poison and that kills you.
Like a
venomous, they bite
frog.
You and inject you with venom. Is that the distinction?
Yeah.
Hey, look, we just did a service for everyone listening.
Yeah.
Okay. I did not see any snakes. I saw some horses and I heard a coyote.
That's right. You were saying you thought it was a wolf.
Yeah, but not as interesting as your snake.
Well, you reminded me animals that kill you in the wild. It was crazy. Yeah.
Well, shit, man. I'm glad you didn't step on that snake.
I almost did. I was on the phone with my wife.
Oof.
Yeah, they're all over Texas. There's a lot of them here. It's kind of like I live in a dungeon. Remember that era where every villain in the dungeon was like snakes, spiders, and skeletons?
Snakes, spiders, scorpions.
And skeletons.
Yeah, skeletons, right.
It's kind of like Texas.
Not as bad as Australia for the crazy animals that will kill you, right?
Yeah, there's more, I think, there than anywhere else in the world. And then Texas is like number 2. Isn't that crazy? That's like the villains. And that's something that I want. It's funny that we bring that up because it's something that I wanted to talk about with Geoff. Jeff. I just want to say Jeff because I knew a guy whose name is spelled that way and we had to call him Jeff. But it's Jeff, right? Geoff Keighley.
Are you saying something different?
Jeff. Like
Jeff?
Jeff. Anyways.
Really?
That guy. Okay, so we were talking about those villains, right? Which were like in every game. And it was so simple, right? When he came on the scene, I was thinking about this before he came on and it's just like our previous guest, like perfect timing. Like, and he's built for the job, which is crazy. Like I thought he was an actor when I first saw him until I heard him get interviewed. And I was like, dude, this guy knows games. Like he's not an actor, because he came in right after the 90s when everything was like, yeah, we're going to play this game and your head's going to explode. Woo. You know what I'm saying? It was like all the games were like, all the advertisements were like that.
Yes, right. Yes, the hype. All the hype was bro
Edge.
Hype.
Yeah, it was yeah. And that was before, like, so there's like these seasons, right? What was the first one? It was like games were respected as like an appliance, and then they were like a toy, like a video, like, and then they turned into the edgy thing, and then it was like that season right after edgy when he came on the scene.
Okay.
And it was just really like, it's like, wow, there's a guy that's on TV that actually, or not TV. I used to watch him on game trailers, and I love the show. and I was excited to see. He just he's a good person. I always told, whenever we were talking about bringing him on, he reminded me of Kurt Loder. You know, is that his name, Kurt Loder from MTV?
Yeah, from MTV.
Yeah. So really, it's a good. I don't know. I was really excited to get to talk to him and get to meet him. Yeah.
Me too. He's got a really cool story and a pretty unique one. So why don't we roll the conversation, and hope you all enjoy it.
Leveling up your game dev career, but not sure where to start?
Maybe you're trying to break into the industry, looking to connect with other people who are making games.
Consider joining the International Game Developers Association, the IGDA, the world's largest nonprofit, member-driven professional association serving all individuals who create games.
I was in the IGDA in Chicago, met a lot of people. Great way to network.
The IGDA exists to support and empower game developers around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers.
Discounts,
educational and advocacy-based resources,
mentorship,
and solidarity across 160 plus chapters.
To join the IGDA, visit igda.org/membership and use the code IGDA 4th Curtain 15, no spaces there,
to get 15% off 1- and 2-year memberships, as well as a student membership.
Joining the IGDA is a great move for your career, and as a nonprofit supporting everyone making games, it's a great move for the whole community. Join today. Okay, thank you for joining us today, friends. I'm so excited for this one. Geoff Keighley is with us today, and Geoff, you're usually the one introducing people, so maybe just sit back, relax a little bit while I fire off an exquisitely researched and appropriately flattering intro for you. Geoff has made a career in video games as a journalist and a personality. We've got a few of those in our biz, but we all know him as the host of the Game Awards and most recently Summer Game Fest, which I think I'm hopeful that it's the heir apparent of E3. Maybe, I don't know. We'll ask you all about that. If you're a little older, you probably know him from Spike TV's VGAs, and if you go way back, maybe from G4TV. Aaron, huh?
That was my favorite. That's what I used to watch. Okay.
He's written for Kotaku, Entertainment Weekly, Fortune Magazine. He's created shows for MTV. He's got a cameo in Death Stranding.
What? I didn't know that.
Geoff, welcome to the show.
That's cool.
How you doing?
Great to be here. Hello, Alex, Aaron. Thanks for inviting me on. And yes, that is a full recap of my career. You left out some of the bad parts, but all the good parts, yes.
Well, the bad parts are probably the interesting parts, but usually we have folks on that like are game director or studio founder. And I think you have one of the more visible spots, roles, influences in our industry. I think you may be in a very unique position in terms of the kind of access that you have to development and development teams, the kinds of people that you've met, and your influence on the industry, especially in the celebration of our craft and all of that. How did you get into it? And is that fair? Is that a fair opinion? Is that a fair view?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm honored to be in the position I am. It's a great kind of power comes the responsibility, right, of sort of doing things right. So yeah, I've spent my whole life in the gaming industry, and I'm really kind of in a position now where it's everything I always dreamed about being able to do. I've never had another job in my life, right? I mean, my first job was, writing for a video game magazine when I was 13 years old, and that became my summer job. So I haven't had to work anywhere else. Games have always been sort of this little side summer job that turned into, a job after college that turned into a career now. But I mean, if you really want to wind things back to where it all began, I was a big fan of adventure games when I was a kid. My brother and I would play all the old Sierra and LucasArts adventure games. Those really just sort of inspired me on IBM PC back in the day. So one day I decided to write a letter to Sierra Online and put it in the post mail, as we did back in the 1990s. From Toronto, Canada, where I grew up. I was 12 years old, and I sent a letter to Sierra in Oakhurst, California, saying, I love your games. I want to learn more about how you make them, and never expected to get a response. But 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a letter back in the mail from Sierra, this lady named Gano Hain, who was a producer there at Sierra, and said, Geoff, thank you so much for your letter. It's amazing that you love our games. Would you be interested in helping us test some early versions of upcoming
cool.
games as a beta tester. So I got to beta test in 1992 a game called EcoQuest 2.
EcoQuest
for Cetus.
Yes, I was gonna hope they did not send Leisure Suit Larry out to a 13-year-old.
No, I was gonna say.
Did you play the King's Quest series? The King's Quest series?
Of course. Oh yeah. I did. I played Leisure Suit Larry as well. But Space Quest, King's Quest, Quest for Glory, all those games I loved. Gabriel Knight, Freddy Farkas. So I started beta testing these games, and then EcoQuest was the first one. I think Freddy Farkas Frontier Pharmacist was the second one I did, and then Gabriel Knight. So I got to play these games early, and it was really cool for me to kind of understand how they made the games. And you would play them, and you'd hit Control L on your keyboard, and you'd actually be able to log bugs as you played the game and give feedback on things. So anyways, how that led to a career was I was also on CompuServe in the early days, because when pre-internet, they had the Sierra BBS where you had to basically call long distance to get hints on games. And I lived in Toronto, Canada, and I remember you'd have to call this BBS, which was like a California Oakhurst phone number. And by then, long distance charges, you paid by the minute. So you'd have to log on to this BBS, and to get a hint, you'd have to go through this text menu. And it was you almost had to gamify, like, how quickly could you get through to the hints you needed? Because if you took more minutes, you were going to be charged more money. So anyway, so I spent, one month, it was like hundreds of dollars probably on this BBS talking about Sierra games. So CompuServe came along, which was, again, pre-internet, was a way to sort of have a local phone number where you could sort of dial into a service and not have to pay long distance charges. So there was a forum on CompuServe called the Gamers Forum, and I was on there talking about games. And when the new Sierra games would come out, I could answer hints basically for free for people, because I had beta tested the games and I knew how to get through the games. So instead of people having to call this long distance BBS, I was able to sort of give some hints for these games, how to solve these puzzles in the Sierra games. So anyways, I was doing that just as a fan. And one day I got an email on CompuServe from a guy who was the editor of a magazine called Computer Games Strategy Plus. At the time it was just called Strategy Plus Magazine.
I remember
saying that it seems that you know a lot about these Sierra games. We like how you write. Would you ever be interested in writing, for our magazine? And of course, what I love about this story is that, he had no idea that I was probably 13 years old at the time, because it was purely just judging it based on the quality of, my written work, on CompuServe. This person knows how to write. So this was all done over, there was no video. There was not even phone calls back in the day. It was basically just it was like, an email from him. And I said, sure, sounds great. So then I got to write a preview of Will Wright's Sim Farm, which was one of the, knockoffs or knock-ons of SimCity. So I got to write a preview for that. And then sort of all through high school, I got to write, previews of games, and eventually started to go visit game studios. So I got to go visit id in like 1994, sort of shortly after the launch of Doom, and visit those guys. So I got exposed to a lot of these game developers when I was still in high school, and I would take trips and kind of write articles about them. And that led to the first E3 in 1995. So yeah, that's really where it kind of just began, as me sort of, getting access to developers, meeting them, and meeting Tim Sweeney when he was just starting this idea of an Unreal Engine, right, and giving me the first ever demo of that in 1995 and stuff like that. So yeah, it all began back then.
That's where it started. Incredible.
That's awesome.
So wait, so were you getting? So you're 13. You write something for Computer Game Strategy Plus. Did they pay you?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you probably got paid $50, or it was not that much. But when you're a kid, that's instead of a paper route or something. That's like something cool to do. Yeah. And you got free games. Which was a huge benefit. Yeah.
That's awesome.
They just sent you a
Did
check.
not get paid as a beta tester. Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't get paid as a beta tester. That was all volunteer. But yes, I started writing articles, and they would send me a check in the mail in Canada, and the magazine would show up on a newsstand in Markham, Ontario. So it'd be so cool. I'd go to this. I'm like, wow, there's my written word.
Do you still have them?
Somehow showed up in this magazine. Yeah, I still. Yeah, I have archives of all that stuff. I mean, I kept a lot of the old game swag and paraphernalia that I would get from those days, and it was cool. So I made a little bit of money, and that was sort of enough that I was able to kind of make that my summer job, or what I would do as a job kind of all through high school. And then same thing sort of, through college and stuff like that. I did as a side gig, and I never thought necessarily it was going to turn into a career.
What was your major in college?
Yeah, what did you study in
college? I
majored
in philosophy and business. I was a double major at USC in Los Angeles, and I was going to go to law school. That was sort of the plan. I did the LSAT and got accepted a few places, but just never ended up doing that because I just that year, just as I was graduating college, had Time Magazine come to me saying, "Hey, we want you to start writing even more about games and doing business profiles and doing more things." A guy named Josh Quittner, who was the digital editor at Time, kind of came to me with that opportunity. I was like, "Oh, this is kind of interesting." So yeah, it just sort of snowballed from there. And I've never, you mentioned, I've had lots of developers on. I've never really aspired to like develop a game, and I know a lot of my friends in the media back in the day. It was kind of a gateway to becoming a game developer or going to make games. And even though I've been around a lot of developers, I was there with Valve when they were first making Half-Life and doing all these other amazing stories. I never really had the itch to go and make a game, so I was just excited to sort of cover games and elevate the storytelling around the people who make games. And that was always something I was always fascinated with, is getting to hang out with like Will Wright. I remember when I was a kid, and it's like talking to this guy. I'm like, this is like a modern day Einstein.
Like? Yeah. Or Alex
I was going to say, or Alex Seropian and Aaron.
Yeah. Wearing all the yeah. No, it was so yeah. I was so fun to be around like all these. Yeah, I mean, just super inspiring people that I think just honestly as a kid, I think it helped just inspire me outside of work. It was just like cool to be around these really smart people that I got access to that were, really, good people. I mean, that was the great thing about gaming too, is that, genuinely everyone was like really above board and awesome, smart, good people in the industry generally. And whether that was, Ken and Roberta Williams at Sierra or Tim Schafer at Lucas or Will Wright. Even the id guys and stuff, and Mark Rain and Tim Sweeney at Epic, like all those guys, I really grew up with them. So they were, it was great to be inspired by them, but also I think just was really kind of personally motivating to have those sort of icons of the industry giving you their time. And yeah, I would sit with Will Wright, and I would say to myself, it feels like I'm sitting with like a modern day Einstein. Like it's amazing, like how his brain worked and the things he would talk about and think about. So yeah, it made me realize that a lot of gamers at that time didn't really understand who made the games. And I was always, I loved even, Sierra, like, Jane Jensen or Roberta Williams or Josh Mandel or Al Lowe or, all these incredible creators that worked on these games. I think people didn't really know them. So I always was like, oh, maybe there's a way to cover their stories and do a little bit more behind the scenes reporting on games versus just straight reviews and previews. And that was sort of became a very early inspiration for me when I started in college writing what we called the Behind the Game series on GameSpot, which were these sort of longer pieces that looked at the development of games. So I did like a piece on the making of Unreal, the original game that Digital Extremes did with Epic, or Half-Life, right? I mean, I was embedded with Valve when they made the original Half-Life, so that was like with Gabe and the team when Valve was just starting.
Was before Steam was a thing, right?
Yeah, pre-Steam. Yeah, that was, Steam was Half-Life 2 time. And yeah, this was like the original game that they published with Sierra.
So like small team, like kind of indie game dev at the time.
Yeah, no,
right?
Yeah, they were, they were two guys, Gabe and Mike Harrington. They had come out of Microsoft and they, wanted to, just build a cool game. So they hired a bunch of people from the mod community, set up an office in Kirkland. They licensed id Tech, right? So they licensed the Quake engine to kind of make a game, and then they got a publishing deal with Sierra for Half-Life. And I sort of tracked the development of that game, and all those guys, still know to this day. I was just at dinner in LA a couple weeks ago with one of them, Derek Asali, and so they brought people in from the mod community, built that game, and I wrote this kind of pretty exhaustive piece that chronicled the making of the original Half-Life, which I think is still online somewhere. And that was when I sort of, transitioned from just being a kid who gave hints and tips and wrote previews and reviews of games to doing kind of deeper, in-depth, storytelling about the making of games.
Yeah, I remember that.
Was there some like, although those devs that you're talking about, very formative, creative folks. You have a unique position to have spent time with all of them. Is there something that you've noticed that makes you know, that kind of group, like super successful group of people tick, where, or is it different every team you go and spend time with when they're finishing? Are they all different, or is there some through line where it's like, oh yeah, I see a pattern?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, but I do think the thing I learned early on with a lot of the best teams is that they would just really rapidly iterate and always have things playable and up, and just, you know, kind of like all those, you know, id or Valve or these other studios. It's just like they would always have stuff playable, and I think they weren't super like, you know, design doc heavy, and sort of they were very much like, let's get something on screen, let's play it, let's play test things, let's get feedback from people. Like I always remember when I would go to those studios, would always be telling, because they would often have me sit down and play the game, and they would all be there with like notepads. Like they'd be really curious, like what your feeling was like when you played it, the response, the feedback loop. And that was always, you know, I think a sign of a great studio, that they were really interested in feedback, and they really wanted to evolve the game. Some other places you'd go and they'd be like, hey, here's our game, go sit in a room, play it, come back and tell us what you think. Or they were just like, hey, the game's done. And yeah, Valve famously, even on Half-Life, I mean, they basically threw out the game and redid it, right? And that sort of sense of, you know, constantly evolving and iterating on a game, I think, is what I found. You know, most of the best studios are able to do that and sort of never rest. So yeah, that was kind of a common thing. And you know, other places, I just think they're always, you know, looking to do something different. It was easier back then, right? Because I mean, it was smaller teams, smaller budgets, so you could sort of, you know, iterate, you know, much quicker and stuff like that than some of these, you know, gargantuan games now, which are, you know, you guys know, it's like really hard. That's part of the thing, you know, I'm excited about what you're doing with UEFN and some of that, because I think it goes back to the roots, right, of sort of, you know, rapid prototyping and experimenting on gameplay versus having to, you know, have some massive budget and massive production behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure.
What did you think about when it, like, what do you like better whenever you were looking at these games, like being alone in that room and nobody standing behind you, or like that crowd of people just like looking over your shoulder?
It creates a lot of pressure, I would tell you, because it's like, you know, one of the things is because I'm sort of a, you know, a face known in gaming, I think everyone's like very conscious of like, how good are you at these games or whatever, right? And it's sort of, you're always
how good are you at these games?
Well, I will say I was a lot better back in the day, right? And that's one thing, like, you know, people are always like, why aren't you streaming on Twitch? I was like, you probably don't want to see me stream on Twitch. I think there's a sense that you're going to be, you know, a master of Mortal Kombat and Call of Duty and Valorant and all these other things. And yeah, no, I mean, I really, like, I loved, you know, when I was a kid, I mean, obviously we played a lot of the, you know, the Mario games, things like that, but it was, I loved adventure games, story games. It wasn't necessarily about kind of, you know, crazy competitive multiplayer stuff. And even though, you know, I loved playing, you know, Duke 3D multiplayer and Descent and Quake, I mean, that era of sort of the early days of multiplayer, like my brother and I would, you know, have modems and we'd connect, you know, our rooms in the house, we'd call each other, right? We'd have 2 lines, we'd call each other on the modems to play, you know, multiplayer. But yeah, you know, now I tend to, I still love single player games. I'm, you know, I love narrative single player stuff. That still is sort of what, you know, what I grew up on and what I love. And, but, you know, sitting in that room, I tend to, I mean, it's fun to be around these developers and giving feedback. And I said, the best studios, you can tell, even if they're at the top of their game, they're always eyebrows raised, curious about, what did you think about this? What feedback do you have? And so it reminds me, honestly, a little bit of that beta testing thing, right? Where you're sort of like, you know, then you're in an office, you know, beta testing live and giving feedback and hopefully helping the game get better. See, I always love that. I mean, now I don't get to do that anymore, right? I mean, just it feels like things have changed so much. But yeah, in those early days, it was really cool to get to sort of play those games.
We would have you over to beta test our stuff, Geoff, anytime.
Yeah. Okay.
You can do it from your house, actually, from your bedroom.
That's I was gonna say. Now it's all virtual. That's why I get a UEFN code and add you to the team and play stuff. And it's like,
hey, what do you prefer now? Like, because you started writing, and my first experience to seeing who you are was on GTTV, and I was like, oh, this guy, you know, and I never knew you were a writer before that until after, right? So, what do you prefer? Like, if you were gonna do like another project on, let's say, you know, some big IP or something, would you rather do like a short TV thing or YouTube thing, or write something and have pictures and multimedia? Like, where do you lean?
It's a great question. You know, I I started with writing, and then a guy, Victor Lucas, who was really the pioneer of sort of video game television, a show called Electric Playground up in Canada. One year, probably in maybe 2000, kind of hit me up an event saying, "Hey, I think you might be good on camera. Would you want to kind of come and co-host
You're
this
a
show
natural.
with us?"
You are.
And it just kind of worked out. And I never really aspired to do the television thing, but what I've always said is that I was just lucky that I transitioned from sort of just doing purely written work to doing TV stuff, then to doing kind of YouTube, Twitch stuff, just when those mediums became kind of how people consumed content around games, right? Like I love written stuff. I miss writing. I find it harder to write things than host things, right? I think it's like it's harder for me to, just like intellectually, it's like I think it's more challenging, right? I'm more challenged when I write, and I get more stressed than just doing that than producing the Game Awards. But I love it, and the end product. I mean, I'm really proud of those stories of the sort. Hopefully, will stand the test of time. And I think it's so cool that there's an archive now of like the story of the making of Doom 3 or the making of Half-Life or Half-Life 2. But yeah, I mean, so now I would love to do more written stuff. I just think, sadly, so much of the world has moved on to, they want to listen to a podcast. They want to watch a documentary on Netflix versus read a 30,000 word story on a website. So, in 1997, it was awesome to write 20,000 words about the making of Half-Life. And I've done, like I did a story on the making of Half-Life Alyx a couple of years ago on Steam, which was a sort of interactive app. So it kind of had a bunch of 3D in it, but it was more written words. I still have said I would love to do a really amazing documentary, like film on game development at some point, and that's sort of an itch that I've been wanting to scratch. You guys just know, as developers, it's just when you're writing a story, you can kind of have a tape recorder, or you can kind of be around people, and it's less invasive. But as soon as you get into like cameras and filming and all that, especially now with remote production and virtual teams, like it's really, really hard to do that well. It's very disruptive to development. So yeah, all things being equal, I would like to do stuff that's a little bit more multimedia. I miss the written word, but I just think, so few people read anymore that if you want to reach sort of the biggest audience, you kind of have to do stuff that's like video or audio now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, I'm going to jump backwards a little bit because you were talking about getting out of college and you took the LSAT. Don't take this as an insult, but I think you would have made a really good lawyer. I think
I thought the same thing.
I know, but I'm
like he would have memorized all the laws,
That's okay. I'm happy. I'm happy you didn't do that. When I got out of college, I tell this story all the time. When I got out of college, I was going to get a job as a programmer, but I had written a game. I wanted to start a company. I had this choice dilemma. Got advice, ignored the advice, just did what I naively thought I wanted it to do, which turned out fine. But like, did you have did you have a thing?
No, Yeah, I was. I mean, look, I think the law school thing was more just like I was doing well in school. I feel like a lot of people, it's kind of you just go to law school, you don't quite know what you want to do, right? It's like, oh, well, it's like more education is probably going to be a good thing. Will pay off. And look, my sister's a lawyer and went through law school and did great. And I wasn't necessarily super passionate about law. I think it was just sort of like, oh, this could be a cool thing to do to keep my education going after undergrad. So I did it, got into some good schools. I was maybe going to do that. And then, I think the gaming thing I never really saw as a career, right? I thought it was like a cool, fun thing. I got to make a little bit of money, but I just didn't ever think, as a journalist, I was ever going to be able to sort of make things work. And even now, like, I don't describe myself as a journalist anymore, right? I mean, I've kind of become more of an entrepreneur and, built businesses. Because I was scared, even then, like, I remember the editor at Time, Josh, he told me it's like in, 2000, it's like, oh, journalism is, going to be kind of challenged over the next few years. And I mean, you look, 23 years later, it's like, it's even worse than probably people thought it was going to be. So yeah, I didn't know that was, gaming journalism was going to be a full-time career, but then I just got excited about so many opportunities coming my way. I deferred law school for a year and then just never really went back. And so there wasn't really a ton of rhyme or reason to it that I was, super passionate about, property law or, IP or anything like that.
Right. But in your head, were you like, there's like, okay, well, I could go to law school and I kind of know what that path is like. Or maybe I'll wait and I'll try this other thing, which I like doing, and see if anything happens. And then it just kept going and going.
Yeah, I kept going. Exactly. That's why. And I got, kind of excited. The TV stuff started. There just seemed to be a bunch of cool opportunities. I started to make some okay money, and I was just like, I wasn't super, I never really knew why I was going to go to law school. Just like, it was just a thing to do.
Right.
And it just naturally after a couple of years, just kind of passed me by. And I was like, I've always toyed over the years, like maybe one day I'll go back. Cause I think I would love to, know all that, have that knowledge, right, and go back to school. I mean, just like anything, like I wish I could learn all these, I wish I could speak Japanese, but I can't. And it's like, I'd love to learn that at some point, but you get to a point in life where I think just so many other things kind of, take over. And I just got consumed by excitement about the sort of opportunities I was getting in the gaming industry that I just never went back.
Wouldn't that be cool if you could take a pill and you would learn Japanese?
What?
Oh,
I mean, hey, Matrix.
One day. The thing I was just playing with it. There's this crazy thing, this AI program called HeyGen that I was playing with, and it's crazy. You can record a video now in English, like on your iPhone. You upload it, and it takes your voice, it dubs it into Japanese, it changes your lip movements, and it's like you're talking Japanese, and it does it in like 30 seconds. It's crazy. Yeah, and you can do it for any language. And it's just amazing. Yeah, so it's like all this AI stuff now is just like insane. I mean, even now there's like
bonkers.
This real-time translation stuff where I think, within, I don't know, a year, you'll be able on Zoom with someone in a different language and you'll be able to literally like talk to each other.
Babelfish. It's like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Well, they have the little thing you could put in, right? The little earpiece that you could get now that's like real time. And then your phone has the real time stuff. So if you're in Japan, you could put your phone over something and it translates.
Yeah, the science. I was doing that in Japan a couple weeks ago. Yeah, so that's why it's like amazing how this works. And so those kind of things, like whether it was becoming a lawyer or learning languages and stuff like that, it just I got consumed with the excitement around game stuff. And I honestly, that's what I love about this industry is that every year there's something new, there's something exciting, and that's why I've been doing it for like 30 years now, which is crazy. And I always at some point was like, oh, am I going to go more into entertainment stuff, or will I ever get bored with games? And I just get like so excited every year, like when we're doing Game Awards and stuff. I'm not like, oh, this is a boring year, there's nothing happening. Like it's cool. So that's why I just in some ways, 3 decades has moved so quickly that I haven't had a chance to really even think about doing anything else.
I noticed you just described yourself as an entrepreneur. The Game Awards, that's a business, that's a production entity.
Yeah,
that you started.
Yeah, I started it. Yeah.
And same with Summer Game Fest. So that's your product line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I started. I mean, the first thing I did was I started Game Awards because I had done. I'd done obviously the Spike Video Game Awards, as you mentioned. I worked on G4's G4. Even back when I was a kid, I worked on this thing called Cybermania '94, which was like sort of the first televised awards show hosted by Leslie Nielsen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas. So I'd always wanted to sort of do an award show for games, kind of the way I wanted to do it, and I worked on the Spike thing for probably close to a decade. And then, in 2014, I decided to kind of put all my own money against, building this sort of new award show for games. It was not going to be on television. It was going to be on this new kind of, streaming stuff on Twitch and YouTube. And that was something that I basically, invested in myself to kind of build that. And that was sort of the, the more entrepreneurial thing, and kind of took a lot of the money that I'd made over the years being a television, host on TV, and rolled that into sort of, creating the Game Awards. So that was the first. I mean, I'd done obviously the Final Hours apps and things like that. But the first big thing I did was Game Awards, and then and then the Summer Game Fest thing started at that in the pandemic, really. And that was with the guys at I'm 8-Bit that also do they do this thing called Play Days, which is a physical event around it. So we've been building that over the past 4 or 5 years. So I mean, I'm entrepreneurial, but a lot of that stuff is all created out of necessity in some ways, in my view. Like the Spike Video Game Awards were kind of falling apart, and I was like, well, I think we need to build something new here. So I created Game Awards. E3 was falling apart. I'm like, hey, I think we need to create something new. So that was Summer Game Fest. So I don't, I'm not a super risky person, really. It's just sort of one of those things where I'm like, I felt so compelled to, like, for instance, with when the Spike Awards were falling apart, I'm like, well, we can't have a year where we don't have an award show for games. Like, what about the developers that, the next year? So that really just compelled me to, want to go and build something. I had a lot of people that, in the industry that really came after me and said, you should build this. Like even Sam Hauser at Rockstar, I remember at the after party of the last Spike Awards, came up to me and said, hey, it's really important that, you keep doing things like this and have an award show. So yeah, that was certainly the biggest entrepreneurial thing I did, because, instead of buying a house, kind of made the awards, and that was a big, big personal risk. Yeah.
Are you going to add games as a platform category now?
Games as a well, we have like an ongoing game. Are you saying like for user generated content and stuff like that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like a category for best.
Yeah.
Like game made in another game.
Yep. Yeah, we're talking about it. So I think
Aaron wants a UEFN award. Yeah. That's what he wants.
Well, there's going to be other games that have, right? Ark has it.
Or Sims is well, look, I think you'll see this year, I think we are starting to play with that. We have some partnerships coming up that we'll announce about recognizing some of the best work inside certain games. I don't know. The thing that we struggled with, and we've talked about this too, is like, we actually had back in 2014, 15, the first couple of years of Game Awards, we actually had a best user created content award, and it was hard because there were a lot of IP violations back then and things that shut it down in some ways, because there were a lot of issues with some of the games. But now I think you said it's matured, and yes, I think we would like to bring that back. I think right now it's hard to like compare like a Roblox experience to a UFN experience, and so all these. So I think it's like I think we're looking at what we're gonna do around UEFN this year, and I think figuring out how we can sort of celebrate that. And there'll probably be some news coming soon about some things we're doing there. And yes, I think over time we absolutely do want to recognize user created content sort of in and around the show. And look at at some point there'll be maybe a UEFN game that's so amazing that could win Game of the Year, right? And it can also these games can be eligible in any category.
That's good.
But yes, I think for sure, like I'm very interested in that space, and I've done a lot of cool stuff with Fortnite over the years. Like you guys probably remember that crazy Star Wars event we did with that I hosted with J.J. Abrams, which was like insane. In the game there were like 10 million plus people all there, and we were doing an interview, and the Millennium Falcon was flying over you. So yeah, I'm a big believer in especially the Unreal Engine and Fortnite becoming kind of a really cool platform for new types of games.
Yeah, that's we are too. That's cool, Aaron. Yeah, we got to aim for Game of the Year.
We got to, and we know them already, so maybe we got to know.
So I mean, what is like? So putting on a show like that, like as a product, what's it like? What goes in? I imagine there's a ton of prep that goes into that, a lot of pre-production. What's the development cycle like for that? And this is a separate question, but related. What's it like making a product that you personally are the center of? Yeah.
Great questions.
Very interesting.
Well, I would say the cycle it's pretty long. I think it's longer than people realize. Something like the Game Awards, I mean, really is sort of a year-round thing. I mean, we have to, book the theater, almost a year out, right, and things like that, and figure out dates and timing. And then, I think people don't realize probably how much time I spend behind the scenes meeting with developers, looking at games, getting things pitched, talking about what the trailers will be like. It's a very curated show. I was just in Japan for a couple of weeks looking at a bunch of games and evaluating things. So yeah, I'm very hands-on too. Like, even though I'm the face of it, I really am, picking the games, working with the game companies, building all that. We have a great team that helps us put it all together, but a lot of the editorial pieces are really driven by me. So yeah, it's obviously we have other shows now. So we have like the Summer Game Fest show. We do a show at Gamescom in Germany. So we have multiple shows throughout the year that sort of service the same,
That's
base
awesome.
of game companies. So we talk to people about things, and things often move between, one show to the next, or things get delayed and go from Summer Game Fest to the Game Awards. So, but yeah, it's a constant, pretty much year-round thing. I would say, probably 6 months of my year is exclusively devoted to the Game Awards, and it is, this going concern where I kind of know every year I'm going to be devoting a bunch of time to it. And yeah, I'm proud to. Like it's amazing how it's grown over the past decade. This is our 10th year this year of the show. which is just it's hard to believe, and it's grown from a couple million people watching in 2014 to 103 million live streams last year. So
wow,
it's been
that's
a crazy
Mr.
ride.
Beast
I'm not sure it's going to
territory
keep
right
growing.
there.
Yeah, well, that's kind of you to say, but it's and I think I appreciate what Game Awards is. I think it means a lot to people, both the developers obviously, but the fans. They just really do care about it, and it's not just a thing on the internet. So it's really like a passion point for people. So yeah, I love doing it.
It's a big event. It's a big event. It generates a lot of conversation. I think it's where the tone for the coming year is kind of set. It does have a huge
trailers.
impact.
Like people look forward to the trailers, like the announcements.
Oh yeah, we that's why.
So it's like the Super Bowl. It's like the Super Bowl.
Yes,
it is. It's the Super Bowl of video games. It is.
No, I mean, the thing is though, there's a lot of pressure just because you said fans have crazy expectations, and we don't make the game, so we sort of have to, we like sometimes there'll be a game we wanted to show. There's one last week that we thought we were going to have, and now the game's getting delayed, so they're not going to be ready, and it's like, oh my god, that's heartbreaking. So yeah, it ties back to your question about sort of me as an individual being the face of it. I mean, they're good and bad aspects to that. I never really set out to be the host of the show. It's not like I come out and do a 10-minute comedy monologue, right? I mean, I just come out and I'm sort of more of a master of ceremonies, right? But yeah, it's just not my thing. I'm going to come out and talk about games, but there's an authenticity to it, which I think people appreciate. That when I'm introducing a game, it's like a game that I've actually played, or I know the developer, and so that it's not just me reading a script. Like there've been times on the show where like the prompter will go out, and I'll just people well, we didn't even notice. It's like, yeah, I knew what I was talking about. It's like, it's like I've written what I was going to say. I worked with the developer. So there's part of the secret of our show is that it is authentically me kind of hosting it, and not just not just a talent. But there's downsides too. I mean, I think the hardest part with Game Awards is this view that somehow I'm the one picking the nominees and the winners. And that's, I have nothing to do with that. We have a separate jury, and I, because I'm so conflicted in many ways with working with the game companies as sponsors and as content partners, I stay out of that. But there's still this kind of sometimes view on the internet that, Jeff's picking, or he's deciding, or he's biased in one way or not. So because I'm sort of the face of it, that's always something that is a constant sort of source of misinformation about that. So that's kind of probably the biggest downside of being sort of, the public face of it.
Right. Yeah. How big is, what goes into making it, people wise? How many folks put that show together?
Well, we have, a core team, I'd say it's not actually that big. It's probably about 10 people that are sort of our core unit that moves between show to show. When you get to a production of that scale, you have, hundreds of people actually involved. And because we're in LA and we're a big award show, there are people that actually, that's what they do for a living, is they move from kind of one award show to the next. So they do the Emmys, and they go do the Billboard Music Awards, and they do the Game Awards. And so there are these people that move from show to show, and they're very skilled stage managers and producers and all those folks. So we work with a lot of those people. And that's why I learned a lot of, who those people are and how to work with them from my time working in television. Like the showrunner of Game Awards, my partner in it is Kimmy Kim, who I met working on the Spike Video Game Awards. And she works on the Oscars and the MTV Movie Awards and other things over the years. So it's a really interesting way that these shows are produced. But yeah, it's a big team that we ultimately kind of work with. And, it was radical when we started, because in 2014, my view was let's make a show that is, as high quality as a television show, but just do it on YouTube and Twitch. And that's always what I've sort of prided myself on, is, doing a show that is a big multi-million-dollar production with an orchestra and, big lights and set. And I think that's something that the game industry deserves, but was definitely pretty radical to sort of do something of that scale 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But worked out.
Are you in LA right now?
I'm in New York right now.
Oh, New York. Cool.
But are you based in LA?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Based in LA. Out in New York doing some business.
From Toronto. Just got back from Japan. Worldwide, baby.
I travel a lot. Yeah, I know. I spent a bunch of time in New York. I love it here. I spent time in London. Yeah, the nature of my job, especially now is really visiting people and visiting studios and, working with advertisers and distributors. And there's lots of elements of, that go into making one of these shows. So I have to be actively out there and playing games on the side as well where I can.
What are you playing?
It's hard to hard. I don't know when is this hitting? I can tell you what I'm playing. Maybe. Wait, when is this episode?
This will
2
go
weeks,
out
right?
in 2 weeks.
Okay, so I think I can say I'm playing Marvel's Spider-Man 2 right now.
Oh,
that embargo will be out, so I'm playing that right now. Yeah.
Cool.
Right on. And you got a big smile on your face, so I'm guessing you're enjoying it.
He likes it. He's like, it's good.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, look, it's been an amazing year for games, right? I mean, that's one of the things that I think is going to be really interesting with Game of the Year this year is that it's it's going to be a real battle. And some years I always say that
the Game of the Year, like the balloting and that you have a different group. You separate yourself out, because you're dealing with. But who would you vote for Game of the Year?
Well, I haven't played everything yet, but I mean, look, there's
Alex, man, you can't ask that.
What, I can?
No, I was just out. I just had dinner last night with Sam Lake here in New York, and Alan Wake's coming out. I'm really excited about that. I haven't played that yet, and that'll be out in October. One. So that could be Alan Wake too. Yeah. So that will be good. But look, I think if you ask people and you look at the Metacritic scores, I think obviously Baldur's Gate and Tears of the Kingdom I think are sort of some of the highest ranked games. So I think those are gonna I can't tell you between those two how that shakes out. And it's been a really good year. I always say
been Diablo as well.
Diablo, Final Fantasy,
Dave the Diver,
Starfield, Dave the Diver, Mario Wonder.
Oh yeah, Mario Wonders. That's right. Or Wonder.
A lot of stuff. So so it's one of those years where. Look, as a producer, you kind of love it because anything could win. Like that creates a lot of excitement, and and I'm sure there will be a lot of drama on the internet. No matter what sort of happens, because even 6 nominees,
it's a great fuel. It's great. Yeah, great fuel for.
There's going to be stuff that doesn't even get nominated, and that'll be huge drama in November when that happens. So it's I feel like even last year, like Elden Ring, I think was. Kind of probably going to win, and God of War got some momentum, and there were some other great games, but that was sort of likely that was going to win. This year I really can't tell you, right? I think there's 2 or 3 or 4 games that all could win, and that's what you want is 6 nominees for Game of the Year, and literally there's no front runner, which I think makes for a really exciting show. So we'll see. But I don't know what's ultimately going to prevail, but it's been a really, really strong year.
Yeah. So these shows, you put on these shows, they're live, right?
They're fully live, yeah.
I'm guessing you must have had some mishaps over the 10 years. Any good ones?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the first year of the Game Awards was probably the most tense because we were doing it live. We were doing it in Las Vegas at the Britney Spears Theater because we couldn't afford to kind of build our own set. So she kindly lent us her set from her Pieces of Me show at the Axis Theater in Vegas. And with that one, we had a lot of bands performing. We had Imagine Dragons, other folks all performing there live. And you do these sound checks before the show. And what happens is the guys around the soundboard, they have to basically save the levels, right? And it's sort of just like saving a game, right? You sort of save the state of all the different, volumes and knobs and things like that. And about 15 minutes before the show, they came up and said, well, we've got a bit of a problem that the save file is corrupt. So we have none of the levels for any of the bands that are going to be playing the show live tonight. So yeah, I basically they had to sound check the bands basically as they were getting ready to perform. So if you go back and watch that video, I'm just vamping for a couple of minutes in between performances until they give me a thumbs up. He's like, hey, things are going to work. Yeah, that was an extremely sort of tense mishap. And then, there have been other things where I think one year, it was 2015, the second year, Jade Raymond was presenting an award and we gave her the wrong envelope or something, so she opened it up and I think she said the wrong name, and it was a bunch of confusion and stuff like that. So typical just like Oscars thing. So that was, again, we apologize to Jade, it was totally our fault. So things like that just naturally happen. But I love the energy of a live show, and I think especially now in an environment where so many of these other events like Nintendo Directs and everything are so much on tape. Like I think there's an energy to a live crowd reacting to something. Like I love, as you were talking about the announcements, like last year when we revealed Hades 2, like people went nuts, and it's just there's an infectious enthusiasm that comes out of our shows, which I think really like drives the excitement about it. So yeah, I love the live aspect of it. I think that really differentiates us. And yeah, I'm always a big proponent of like making it a big live moment.
I think that is super cool. I mean, it gives some personality to the games, of people making the games, and just the vibe.
Well, even the developers when they're in the audience, like I mean, it's you guys know it's like gives people a lift when like there's excitement and fans and cheering and all that, and that's I really try and preserve that live experience. And luckily through the pandemic, we were still able to do our show every year. The 2020 show we had to do all over Zoom, but at least we were able to like make it happen. So yeah, that's another thing that I'm really proud that we never missed a year in the pandemic.
Cool. What happened to E3?
Yeah, E3. Look, I mean, E3 was amazing. I'm proud to say that I went to every physical E3 that happened. I started
even
in
Atlanta. Huh?
As a kid.
Really, you're Atlanta OG. Whoa.
Yeah, the 2 years Atlanta, and then before that in LA, 1995, 1996. Like I was there in '95. That was the year the PlayStation was launching, and I went to there was a launch party where like Michael Jackson showed up, and it was just crazy, like sort of insane. And it's as a I don't know 15 or something like that. It was just like it was a crazy moment to be there and be a part of that. So yeah, I really loved E3 and kind of what it represented to the industry, and did a lot, obviously covering it for G4 and Spike, and then we did the YouTube shows live from E3 every year. And then I eventually started actually working with E3 and did a thing called E3 Coliseum, which was kind of some panels for consumers. What happened? I mean, it's sort of a complicated set of issues, right? And I think it's sort of, I think the media landscape changing. I think publishers sort of just changing how they approach kind of talking to people about games. So I think E3 really, when it started, was a trade show, right? And I mean, a lot of the audience were people from the GameStops going and other mom and pop retailers, figuring out which games they were going to order. Obviously, over the past 2 decades, that's radically changed. And E3 tried to evolve. I mean, they tried to, add consumers in, and we did a lot of things with like live streaming and helping them. But it's sort of similar to, I think, what kind of happened with why the Video Game Awards just didn't work on Spike is it's sort of a legacy format. You're sort of somehow you're stuck so much to the past that it's hard to innovate to the future. And that's a lot of, I think, what happened with E3 is it was sort of this, big monolithic show that was built as a trade show with, selling booth space to companies. And it just became a thing where it's like people didn't really need to spend $10 million on a booth anymore. They could talk directly to consumers through social media, through their YouTube channel, or through other digital ways. So I think the E3 business model just sort of, they didn't reinvent it fast enough. And then I think companies started to pull out. And then, the pandemic happened, and, that was, I decided to kind of quit E3 in 2020 pre-pandemic. Then the pandemic happened, and then I started this new thing, Summer Game Fest, which was just my hope to just try and come up with something to replace that E3 time of year, because I thought it was really important to have this June moment for the entire industry. And I was not confident that, E3 was ever really going to survive. And I mean, I think they tried to do it with the PAX guys, and there've been 4 or 5 aborted attempts I think even now they're talking about like, oh, in 2025, maybe it'll come back. I mean, I would, be beyond shocked if it does.
I'll go.
And I think
I'll go.
Well, and for us, it's like, I always say, Summer Game Fest is not an E3 replacement. It's really sort of a new concept. But I know why people look at it that way, right? And compare it to, what E3 was. I mean, the E3 of, 2013 or it was just like those E3s were so amazing, and they were just a special moment in time with, the number of games that were coming out, and everyone kind of, all together. It was really special. I'd love to see that come back in some form, and I hope Summer Game Fest, may grow into that. But yeah, it a lot of factors sort of played into that, with sort of the demise of E3, and it was, it's been a very slow and sort of painful demise over the past decade, really, for E3.
Yeah. I always thought that I agree. I mean, I think that show was really about retail and kind of changed, went away for at least lost most of its influence in our industry, and so the show kind of turned upside
And also
down.
global. It's like the other thing is I found when I started Game Awards, like I came off of a, you know, television network background where you just cared about your Nielsen rating and US viewers. And when I started doing all this digital stuff, the thing that still blows me away is how global our audience is for shows like the Game Awards and, you know, China and India and Southeast Asia and Brazil and, you know, all these other countries. And that was the thing is E3 was, you know, still very much just more like a domestic, and even though it was international that people would come in, it really was sort of like very much a domestic show. And when you move to sort of a digital footprint, it becomes a much more global medium. So yeah, I mean, the E3 brand I think means a lot to people. And I just, you know, the ESA that kind of owns it, which is the industry's governing body, just was just very slow. And I met with them multiple times in Washington, D.C. I really tried to help them figure out a way to kind of reinvent E3. But I think for a variety of reasons, the momentum and the history of what E3 was just too hard to untangle.
I know you said Summer Game Fest not a replacement for E3. Do you have like a vision for how it evolves, you know, over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, what I say with that show is that every year we sort of built something new. So it started in the pandemic, which is like literally me at home broadcasting, you know, the first hands-on with the PS5 DualSense controller and just doing all this. And that was just, you know, a function of like what we could do. And then we moved it into a studio for a couple of years. And then last year we added this thing called Play Days, which is like kind of media hands-on on a much kind of smaller scale, but was a physical aspect to it. And then this year we added a live audience. So similar to the Game Awards, we had a live crowd at the YouTube Theater and we did an announcement show. So yeah, I think we're just going to keep building it and iterating. And the thing I always tell people is that, you know, a lot of people will be like, well, this is an E3. And it's like, no, it's not. But I think over the years, it will continue to grow and evolve, and we'll show up and we'll iterate and we'll learn and we'll build. And oh, surprise, surprise, 5 years later, it's actually what it needs to be. Same thing with Game Awards. When I started that, everyone was like, this isn't going to work. It's not on TV. Like it's, you know, it's not interesting to us because the value of this show was always that it was hitting all these mainstream viewers on TV. And now, like, you know, 10 years later, here we are, you know, in front of 103 million people globally with this show, which is, you know, bigger than anything on television. So yeah, I think, you know, Summer Game Fest, the vision is really just to keep iterating and working with our partners to kind of add more elements to it. I don't know that it will ever grow to, you know, a big consumer show. You know, I go to Gamescom every year in Germany in August, and we do that consumer show, and it's great. But yeah, I think the vision really is to focus more on like creating a digital experience. I think where, you know, I get excited about for Summer Game Fest and even for Game Awards is longer term. How can we actually bring that experience into game engines a little bit? And that's, you know, I look at a lot of like the UEFN stuff and start to think about like, hey, what's like a cool experience where, you know, imagine we announce a game and then you can jump through a portal and, you know, play 3 minutes or a little demo of something and come back out. It's kind of like, you know, Steam Next Fest, but mixed together with sort of a real-time 3D experience, and, you know, becomes more of a festival. So I think longer term, I'm really interested in thinking about how can we take the idea of like a Summer Game Fest and how can we actually like create that experience for you if you're a 14-year-old kid in Stockholm, Sweden, right? And make you feel a part of something and become part of this experience. So that's where, you know, I've always said that I would never really build a game, but I do like now the idea of using game engines and technology to sort of evolve some of these ideas. So yeah, you know, I'm conscious that now I do these basically television shows that are streamed on YouTube and Twitch. And I think over time, I want to evolve a little bit more into like, how do we create a real-time experience? Similar to that Star Wars thing I did a couple years ago, which was really like disruptive. When Donald Mustard came to me with that idea, I was like, whoa, this is like the future of entertainment. And I don't think anyone's done anything like it since. So I think, so that's like a longer term vision of all my shows, I think, becoming a little bit more digital, but it'll take years.
Top 3 games. You're going to the moon. You're going to Mars. There's only enough. You can only take 3 games with you.
Mars.
Well, yeah, whatever. I just want to know top 3.
It's a good question. I mean, it's also thinking of, you know, I don't know if I would, sort of some of the games I love, would I take them to the moon with me? I don't know if, because I think some of them, like, I always see games through sort of rose-colored glasses, right? Where it's like I remember them much better than they actually were, right? So it's like they go back and play a game from 20 years ago. I'm like, I don't know that Super Mario Brothers 3 was really that great. But no, I would say, like, I mean, obviously some of the early adventure games, like Monkey Island 2, Day of the Tentacle, those Lucas games that, Tim Schafer, Dave Grossman, Ron Gilbert stuff, that was always like really inspiring to me. I loved, Red Dead Redemption, I thought was a game I still really love. It has a special sort of place in my heart there. So there are games that like I remember and love. I don't know that I necessarily have, like you said, these 3 games that I would still play again today. And that's what's great about this medium is that, the games evolve so much. The quality of life of playing a game is just so much easier now than it was, 20 years ago. Right. So, I go back and I love Tetris back in the day, but it's like, is that that would keep me busy on the moon, right?
Tetris,
so
Red Dead,
I would take Tetris
and Day of the Tentacle.
It's very replayable.
Very
replayable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I'm not, even though I love Day of the Tentacle, I'm not sure I want to play that 100 times over, right?
Yeah.
So it's like something like Tetris I would play.
That's fair.
So yeah, it's fun. It's like all those questions. That's what's so interesting about our medium is this intersection of technology and entertainment, and then you said the games get better and better. One of the things we think about this a lot with Game Awards is, the Oscars, you can do these amazing historical montages and footage from Casablanca or Gone with the Wind like holds up, right? Like 80 years later, it's like you can still watch it and still connect with the characters. You take footage of a game from 30 years ago, and it's like, oh god, like, the characters look terrible. It just doesn't have that same emotional connection. And not that even the gameplay. You could show some gameplay of the original Link to the Past, and that kind of works and stuff. But yeah, it's harder to think about how the magic of games translates across decades and generations. So it's a hard question to answer, but there are a couple games at least.
Yeah, we got some in there.
Right on. Right on. Cool. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, Geoff. It's great hearing your story.
Guys.
And best of luck with this year's show. And the prep.
Hopefully we'll see. Hopefully we'll get you guys a nomination one year here, right? For
No, but hey, how about a gaming podcast category?
Hey.
Yeah. No, it's something we thought about that.
We gotta put it again.
Yeah. No, part of it is like, look, we already get in trouble for not presenting enough of the awards we have, right? Because we have 31 awards and we do about half of them in the show. So yeah, we've certainly thought about like there's so many other genres and categories that we could go into, and the media space is something interesting for sure. So not this year, but you never know. I love the podcast format, and I wish I've always wanted to do a podcast myself. I did Hideo Kojima and I did a podcast together last year, which was really fun. So I'd love to get back to doing podcasting because I think it's such a cool format, and I love that you guys do this. And you've had an amazing amazing group of guests. So I'm honored to be on the list. So thank you.
Thanks well, we are honored to have you part of now our crew of alumni. So great hanging out. Thanks for spending a morning with us, and we'll see you around.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
All right. Was that what you were expecting?
I've seen a lot of him. Like, he doesn't know this, but I've seen hours and hours and hours and hours of him.
Oh, he's
incredibly professional. Yeah, he
is super professional.
Yes, like
that I expected that.
Super
I'll tell you
motivating.
what I didn't expect. What I didn't expect was that he funded and has built current crop of shows. That's him. That's his. He owns that. I mean, he's built that. That's really awesome. Impressive.
It is, and it's super important in the industry. Like, people just expect it. Like, that's when you know you have something. You're on, like, you have something really good, right? When it's people just expect it. Like, we're going to the food court. There's a pizza place
almost.
Yeah. It's there. It's gonna be there every year. There's gonna be. And he feels that.
I know you can't not have that. You can't not.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
and it's the best one. I've seen all of them, and I think this is the best iteration of, because there's been other mega award shows like that, and I think this version is in my opinion the best one.
But he's done all of them though, right?
Yeah, but I don't think he had as much control probably at Spike. We should have asked him.
No, well, I mean, it sounded like. Yeah, at Spike, it wasn't him. It was him, but it wasn't like it was the network.
It was the network, right? And I think now he owns it.
I hope we understood that correctly. I think that's.
Yeah, you could kind of tell when you watch it. And on game trailers, too. You could tell he was working there, you know?
Yeah.
That was a really good website. I love that site.
Yeah, so a couple things there. Like, one, he invested in himself. He took what he learned and built, even though it was kind of a singular thing. You know, he didn't have role models. He had role models outside of games, but there weren't people in games doing what he's doing. He developed it, and he invested in himself.
The role model.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. And then his story of like when he was like a teenager, 13.
Yeah, like totally, like yeah, whatever.
Like writing the Sierra Online. Yeah, and they're like, hey, why don't you be a beta tester? And he's like, starts writing hints and stuff. He's like, hey, why don't you write for our magazine, Computer Game Strategy Plus? We used to go and pitch them like Myth and stuff. I remember that. So that's another. It's like, I'm just imagining 13-year-old Geoff getting that email like, hey, would you like to write articles for our magazine? And he's like, sure.
Yeah.
No need for you to know I'm 13.
Yeah. And then he has a podcast with Hideo Kojima in the future. Yeah, whatever. He's just kind of rolling with it, you know, just kind of going. It's really cool that he didn't become a lawyer.
Yeah, you know? But just that whole arc, it's a very self-made, you know, it reminds me a little bit of, you know, we talked to Jonathan last week, and when we talked to Edmund a couple months ago, they both have these stories of like working it, you know, hard work, refining a skill, investing in yourself, and
you're right. That's what modesty looks like, dude. Because it didn't seem like he worked hard. He was like, yeah, you know, just doing it. It's like he was being modest. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very professional, modest. I hope you took notes, Alex.
Wait a second.
I know, it's like, I was like, wait, what?
What?
I'm really glad you got him on the show. By the way, just so everybody knows, I'm the one that asked Alex to get him on the show. I was like, come on, we gotta get him.
Aaron, you have good ideas.
Oh, do I? That's nice.
I mean, you have a barrage of ideas. But some of them are good.
So that's the peak.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us once again, and hope you enjoyed our conversation with Geoff. We sure did, and we'll see you next time.
See you later, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Fourth Curtain Podcast. To get a peek at upcoming episodes or to send in questions to the show, visit our site at thefourthcurtain.com. And be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.